I think most people now are familiar with what happened in 2014 with the violations, mass violations of the rights of Yazidis as well as other communities in Iraq by ISIS, by so-called Islamic State. And in the case of the Yazidis at least, that included genocide. The fight against ISIS, the international coalition which was built against ISIS though, didn't seem to address the need to protect the Yazidi community. It was justified often by politicians around the world by the need to stop violations, by the need to stop massacres. But what we actually saw was something else. We saw a military campaign against ISIS that seemed to take no account of particularly vulnerable communities, whether those were civilians living in Mosul, whether those were civilians sitting in IDP camps, or in particular the 2,000 or 3,000 hostages of ISIS, often Yazidi women, who were still held and who were at grave risk because of the war that then continued. So you have to distinguish the reasons for military action often from the practice of military action. And when we're talking about preventing atrocities, when we're talking about protecting people from genocide in the extreme, we have to make sure that anything that is done is focused rigidly on those protection criteria rather than just being used as a justification for wider reasons. Well, I think if there was a genuine desire to hold the perpetrators of atrocities against the Yazidis to account now, it could be done. We should be clear, it is not a legal problem, it is the absence of political will which is the major obstacle. Perpetrators could be brought to trial in Iraq. In fact, many, certainly middle-ranking ISIS members, if they haven't been killed, many of them have been captured, but they have tended to be convicted for counter-terrorism offences rather than for what they specifically did to the Yazidis. Internationally, we could see Iraq referring its situation to the International Criminal Court. The Security Council has the power to refer the situation in Iraq to the International Criminal Court. Neither of these things have happened. So I think it's less of a legal problem than one of political will. Not just in Iraq, but also in Syria, the Yazidis have faced the most appalling crimes, including genocide, crimes against humanity, and they are still in a hugely precarious situation, both in Syria and also in Iraq. I think there is the suggestion that because ISIS or the so-called Islamic State has suffered territorial losses in Iraq, that it is somehow finished, or that the situation of the Yazidis has been resolved, but this isn't the case. They are still at very serious risk. Large sections of the community remain displaced. They live in IDP camps. The security situation for the community as a whole, and I'd say particularly for female members of the community, is still hugely precarious. But the international community has in many cases moved on and is looking at something else. So it's really important that we listen to the victims of conflict, but civilians generally, to think about what should be the solutions.